Welcome to JonGetsGames. Today I'll be reviewing First Class. This is a 2 to 4 player Euro-style game designed by Helmut Oli, and in this game all you do on your turn is draft a single card from the middle of the table, and that card will let you move your train, add cars to your train, upgrade your cars, or do various other things as you are trying to get the most victory points. This game comes with 5 different modules, and you pick 2 of them each time you sit down to play. These will change the overall rules to the game as well as adding new cards to the mix. First I'll show you how the game plays, and then I'll jump into my review. Before I can show you how to actually play First Class, I'm going to briefly show you how to set up these decks so that you can see how these modules work. These are the 5 in this really nice insert that is nicely labeled, and what you need to do is pick the 2 you want. I'm going to do A and B for the starting one, and you'll notice that these are the decks that are always in every game with these X's, and then all of this entire deck has A on the bottom, but there are 1s, 2s, and 3s. Well, the first thing that you have to do is separate all the 3s, put them on there. You're going to separate the 2s, you're going to put them on here, the 1s, and then you'll do the same thing for the second module that you're using. Now we can get rid of the box, we shuffle up each one of these stacks, and it'll be good to set up the rest of the game. Here's the starting setup for the red player. We can see that they're going to be building these 2 trains as the game goes on by adding more and more carts, but for the moment they start with a 0 value in both. Each train has their own conductor that's going to walk down the train, and we also have this railroad track up here, which this train icon is going to move forward. Down here we have a bank where they will store their coins. These are the mail cars. We see that they are this first player, and finally this is an endgame scoring card. We see up here that they are going to get 2 points at the end of the game for each locomotive card they draft throughout the game. These are selected by the players before the game starts, and now they can take their first turn. In the middle of the table, you can see that I've dealt out 18 one-value cards into 3 rows with 6 columns. Now, this game is going to last 6 total rounds, so for the first and second round, we'll be drawing from the stack of 1s. For the third and fourth round, we'll go through these 2s, and for the final 5th and 6th rounds of the game, we'll go through this 3 stack. Each player's turn is really quite simple. All you do is pick up one card from anywhere on this board. Once you take the card, you will then evaluate that card, and then your turn is over and you'll pass to the next person around the table. Now, it's important to note that the number of cards that remain in these lines is going to be dependent on the number of players. If, for instance, this is a 3-player game, then as soon as 3 cards are taken from a given row, then the rest of the cards are going to be thrown away. So if, for instance, this was taken, and this was taken in a hypothetical 3-player game, then these 3 cards would be discarded the moment that third card was taken. So if it was a 2-player game, then 4 cards would get discarded upon the second one being taken, so it happens really quite fast. Now you may have noticed this card over here which matches the icon for the first player token, and this is in fact the only way that this is going to pass around the table. Now whenever you want to take this card, you immediately discard the card that is to its right, so this gets discarded without being evaluated. That means that if this card had been taken by somebody else mid-game, this would just slide over until somebody grabbed this card, or it's possible that no one would take this at all. Now this is really interesting. If you look at the top, the person who takes the card is going to get the first player marker and take 2 money. The person to their left is going to get nothing. The person 2 to their left is going to get a free 0 rail car, and the person 3 to their left will get either a free rail car or they get to upgrade a 0 to a 1, so it gives benefits to people who are farther and farther away in the new turn order. But the starting player token doesn't actually pass until the end of the round. So players will keep drafting these cards until none remain, because once you take the third one in a row in a 3-player game, obviously it clears these out, and it'll be perfect so that every player is going to take 3 of these cards, and then all of the cards in the table will be taken off. If you're just ending the first, third, or 5th round of the game, then just go ahead and deal out 18 more cards to the top of this deck, and 4 cards will not actually make it out, and they just won't be seen in that one game. If, however, you are ending the 2nd, 4th, or 6th round of the game, you will go into a scoring. But before I go into the scorings, let's talk about how these cards work. The first type of action I want to show you are these train station cards. Now, many of these cards have multiple different actions on them. In this case, there are 2, and you can evaluate them in any order that you like. This top one is really simple. It just means that you take a 0-value train car from the top of the stack and add it to the end of either your top or bottom rail car. This bottom one down here says you can upgrade any 0 car in one of your trains into a 1, and this is easily done by just flipping that card over. It's important to note that you always must upgrade from the left to the right so that you never have a train car with a higher value than the one to its left. This next type of card is really simple. It just means that you take 2 money from the supply and you add them to your bank. Now, it's important to put these in correctly. You must always put them in the far left column if you're able to do so. So we'd have to put these here without putting it down here. Only once this column is full are we able to start putting coins down into this spot, and likewise for these last 2 over here. This actually seems like a good time to talk about these coins and what you do with them. These are not merely currency in the game. In fact, they are bonus actions that you can take before or after your main card action. You can see what you can do with those coins down below. So I could spend one of these coins away in order to take another level 0 card from the supply and put it onto one of my 2 trains. If I'm able to get coins all the way up here, I can spend these to move my conductor or my train, and I'll talk about how those work soon. And finally, over here, these 2 slots let you do an anything upgrade. So you can upgrade any train car into the one that's directly above it, as opposed to being restricted like we were with this original one where you had to do a 0 into a 1. There are 2 more things you can do with money. One is very simple. You could just spend it to get 1 victory point, which is good in case you are capped out and get more money because you're not allowed to store more than 12 on your board. And the other is more complicated. You can spend 4 money in order to take a new endgame objective card, much like this one that we started with. There's always a supply of 4 of these endgame cards, and when you take them in the middle of the game, you will also evaluate the bonus that is down on the bottom in addition to getting the victory points at the end of the game for the number of those specific cards drafted. So this one right here gives 3 points at the end of the game for every conductor card grabbed, and the moment you take it will also move your top and bottom conductor once. As soon as one of these is taken, you immediately refill it from the stack. Next up, we have the conductor card. We see that there are 2 conductor symbols with 2 arrows, and what this means is you can move your top conductor twice and your bottom conductor twice. Now, this is an up to thing, so if you don't have enough, then you could just, of course, move once, and conductors always move over to the right. So in this case, this one would move here, and this one would move over here. This movement is important because during scorings, you're only going to get points for the train cars your conductors are at or have passed. Now we have locomotive cars, and this should be pretty self-explanatory at this point. We have a train, it's going to the left once, and that is associated with this little train icon here. So it goes down the track 1 slot, and if you'll remember, this red player has this endgame card that will give them 2 points at the end of the game for each one of these locomotive cards, so they are more likely to draft this specific card from the tableau because it's worth 2 more points to them. Now the reason you're moving this train along is because there are some one-time and continuing benefits that you can unlock. First of all, you'll notice this little stopwatch here, and that is if you get your train to the stopwatch, then during scorings, you will be able to evaluate the action for this section. And you'll notice the action here is this stopwatch here, which gets you 2 money. These are correlated together. Now, if you move this train 1 more, it's just going to generate you 3 points immediately, but this is just a one-time thing. At this point, we've run out of track, so we should probably look to get some more. Speaking of which, here is a map card. When you take these from the center area, you then add them to the left on this little area of your player board, essentially extending out your track. So you can now move your train farther along, and you'll notice that each one of these cards also has a stopwatch which is associated with a bonus down here. This bonus is much more complicated than this one. If you'll look down here, you'll see this will generate them 1 0 value car. It'll also upgrade a 0 to a 1 and then a 1 to a 2. So a lot of very interesting actions that get opened up by moving the train to this location here. But again, these actions don't actually happen until we do a scoring. The last type of card I'm going to cover are these green contract cards, and these are essentially objectives that you're trying to fulfill. When you draft these cards, you'll put them face up into your area, and as soon as you get the specific condition in the top, you can flip this over and take the bonus in the bottom, although you don't have to take it exactly then. You can wait until the right moment to flip this over as long as the condition still matches. In this case, you would need to have 2 adjacent train cards that are value 2 in either your top or bottom train. The moment you do that, you would get 3 more 0 value cars to add into your train. It's now time to cover the mail car cards that each player starts the game with. We all have the same 4, and the moment you build your 5th car in either your top or bottom train, you must immediately put a mail car down. It is free to put down, and in fact, you get the bonus that is listed down at the bottom, and it will essentially take the 6 car spot there. So if we did this, we would get 2 money. Since we have 2 trains, each player will hypothetically evaluate 2 out of the 4 mail cars that they have. And now let's cover the steam engines, which are the front of every train. You see this 10 over here, that means that this is going to be the 10th car in a train. So the moment you put a 9th car in, just like the mail cars, you then take the top of these cards, you put it down here, and you'll notice that they actually get higher in victory points as you go through them. But you will also notice that down here, there's a one-time bonus of 2 anything upgrades. But once you get farther into this deck, it becomes 1 anything upgrade, even though it is also worth significantly more points when you score that during a scoring. It's worth noting that there's also a race with your conductor once you've completed your train, because the first person to get a conductor all the way to the front of their train is going to get to take one of their little cubes and put it down on this card, showing that they will get 20 victory points. The second person to do this will get 10, and the third will get 5, so hypothetically the same person could get 2 out of these 3 options if they really push to get to the end of their train car and get their conductors all the way over there. At long last, it's finally time to talk about scoring. Now, this is going to happen at the end of the second, fourth, and sixth turn of the game, obviously the sixth turn being the last, and the first thing you do is evaluate your train up here. Now, you get to look at all the bonuses that you get for getting to the stopwatch spots, and you get to do them in any particular order. So right now, the first thing that we could do is evaluate this bonus, which lets them move the train once forward. So we could go all the way over here, and this actually unlocks this card now because we moved the train over here. That gets this bonus unlocked. So we now get to move a conductor. So we could, for instance, move this one over here and then get 2 more zeros from the supply, which we could put maybe right here and then right here. At this point, we would get our 2 coins for getting our train all the way past this spot, which maxes that out there, and we are now done getting our bonus actions for this train. Now we look to our actual tracks, and we score points equal to the numbers on the cards as long as the conductor got to that point or farther. So in this case, they would get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 victory points and add those to their overall score. Of course, if their train had not been able to get to this final spot over here, then they would have had the conductor here and they would have not scored this 1 point here. And I think it's worth noting that you can actually spend some of these coin actions right before you do your scorings, which can be pretty important. Up until this point, I've only covered the basic actions that you will be doing in every single play of this game, but as you can see, there are several other different types of cards that you can play with depending on the different combinations of modules that you choose at the start of each game, but I'm not going to go into how these work. Once the sixth round of the game is complete and we do a regular scoring, we will go into endgame scoring. This is really quite simple. You will just get 1 point for every coin that you have on your player area, and then you will add up the points that you were able to accumulate through the cards that you drafted and how they match to the endgame victory point cards that you have here. Once you add all this up to all the points you got in the middle of the game, you see who has the most points, and they're the winner. Let's now begin the review for first class by covering a few positive points. The first of these has to do with the central mechanic of the game, which is that act of pulling a little card up from the middle of the table and then evaluating the actions on it. I like pretty much everything that goes on here, and it seems really simple, but there are a few interesting ramifications. The first is that it almost has a worker placement vibe to it, because you are taking that card and now nobody else can go there and take that specific action that's on the card, and that action might be rare in this one specific set. So what you're thinking about when you begin the round and you're taking your first card is, what card do I want to grab? And there's probably going to be lots of different cards to take because there are so many cards in the middle of the table. Even if it's a 4-player game and you are the 4th one to take an action, there are still going to be 15 cards available, and I think that you will always have good options available to you. So you're going to go ahead and take cards, and then once it comes back around to you and you want to take your second card, there's going to be significantly less options, and finally when you're grabbing that third card, there'll be very few cards available to you, and it's a very interesting pacing of scarcity. The first card, lots of options. Third card, very, very few options, and that is because of the interaction between the players, because you're taking these cards and you're denying your opponents those options. But in a very cool addition, you have the sweeping of the rest of the cards off of a row once the number of cards are taken that are equal to the player count, and that is so neat because it means that even in that 4-player game, you're not going to have a row be swept off before the 4th player gets to take their first action. It does give the 4th player an interesting decision. If the first 3 people take from the same row, they can take the 4th one and sweep the last couple of cards. But it means that you are doing some interesting denial to your opponents, but it's not overly punitive to that 4th player, at least in the first round. Being 4th player is pretty painful when it is the 3rd round and there are very, very few cards left, but at the end of the day, you can always just take any card and evaluate and upgrade anything action on one of your train cards, which is one of the more powerful actions in the entire game. So even in the worst case scenario, you still have good options available to you, but I really like how the options start out humongous and then definitely get down to a much tighter group, and all of these things come from the simple act of just drawing that little card from the middle of the table. For positive number 2, I want to talk about the seesaw that you have between moving your train down the tracks and then building out the cars you have on your train. As you play the game, you're kind of find yourself going more one way or more the other, and I found that in general you want to focus on one more than the other, but completely ignoring one side is not usually the best thing to do, because getting the benefits from the other is just a nice thing. Because if you go heavy on moving your train along, then you're going to want to occasionally bolster a couple things in your train cars so that the combination effects that you have from all the bonuses on those train tracks can really bolster those different things and get really good things going there. The flip side is if you ignore the train too much, then the opportunity cost of all of these different benefits that you can potentially get is lost. If anything, you want to get your train to the 2 spot before the first scoring, just because getting those extra coins are really nice to have just for all the bonus actions and potentially just victory points. So I like that the game pushes you to pick one or the other as a something to emphasize on, but I also like that there's something good going on with all different aspects of this player board that you're working towards. I'm not saying that you're not going to win if you completely ignore one of these two things, but I think that it is a more satisfying gaming experience, going more like 75-25% with one or the other. And you could do pretty well, I've seen, with even just a 50-50. That's not going to hurt you at all because you will be bolstering a good train and you'll be getting some good bonuses, but maybe not running away with your train. I have seen someone do very well by just going pretty much only on the train because the train, as it's going, if depending on the way you build out the actions, because you're kind of building a little engine up there, it can actually make a whole bunch of cars and upgrade them really well for you down in your main area. So it's a very cool way that these two things interact, and I really enjoy kind of exploring both of those. I think that the actual pushing the train down the track is maybe slightly more interesting, but all in all, it's a rewarding balancing act between these two main strategies. Positive number 3 has to do with one of the coolest aspects to this game, and that is the 5 different modules that you get to choose from, and you pick only 2 of them. This means that there are 10 different combinations that you can play with, and to a certain degree, you could argue that there are 10 different games inside this box because of it. Because even though the main structure for the game is the same each time you sit down to play it, those modules really do add significant tweaks to how you're going to play one game to the next. In one game, maybe there's a difference between your top car and your bottom car. In another game, you put things in between the cars that are situationally conditional based on how you're upgrading those specific cars. There is even a module, probably the one that people talk about the most, a murder mystery module, where you deal out hidden roles to each person around the table, and one of them is a murderer, and then all throughout the game, people are taking these suspicion tokens and giving suspicion tokens, or investigation tokens, I guess, to each other, and at the end of the game, the person with the most of the fingerprint evidence gets arrested and goes to jail. Even they lose, even if they had the most points, and the person who's the murderer takes more of those investigation tokens. So the variety is just so huge here, and I love being able to sit down and be like, which one of these 10 games do I want to play right now? And then ask people around the table, which ones have you played with? Which ones have you played with? Let's try to come up with a combination that none of us have played. And it's going to be a bunch of games before you are in a situation where you've done every single one of them. Positive point number 4 is simply that I was surprised to see how fast this game played. The first time I sat down to play it, I had my nose in the rules as I was teaching it to 2 of my friends, and we played the full game, and I looked at the clock and realized that only 60 minutes had gone by, and I was shocked. I genuinely thought it was about 90 minutes, not because I felt like it was going long, but because I felt like I'd done 90 minutes worth of stuff in only 60 minutes. The decisions I was making were so interesting. The kind of combos I was doing were so satisfying. At the end of the game, I felt like it was about time for it to end, and I felt like I had done so many things. And I just feel like you get more bang for your time buck than I'm used to with your typical Euro. So even in a 4-player game, I think it was like an hour 15, maybe an hour 20. And you do so many things. It's such a satisfying package in a short amount of time. And I was quite surprised by it. And now we've reached positive point number 5. I apparently have a lot of good things to say about this game. I want to talk about the money actions. This is such a neat mechanism in the game. Usually when you sit down to play a game and you see, oh, there's money and you can get money for doing this or that, you think, okay, whatever, it's just a currency. Maybe you spend it to play cards or just do this or that. It's just a kind of baseline resource, but not in this game. The money that you gather is essentially bonus actions, and there are 3 different types of them, and the more you hoard them, the better they get. And I love the way that these can combo into all the other things that you're doing. I mentioned earlier that you make 18 real decisions in the game. I guess to a certain degree that was not entirely accurate because every time you evaluate the actions on your player board, you're making decisions with them as well. And it's just really great managing your money in such a way as to evaluate the actions in the best possible way. Getting them all the way to the end to get those anything upgrades is really good, but you're probably stalling out on some other combos that you're trying to do, and it just brings in so many extra really great decisions, and it's just fun to realize that there's this thing you really want to do, and can you do it, and then you realize, I know, I'm going to dump like 6 money, and I throw all these cars down, and I do this, and I move the conductor, and then I do this, and you can have really big explosive turns by just cashing out all this money. And then of course at the end of the game, if you have money left over, it's just worth victory points. So I think in general this is just a really wonderful mechanism. Let's now move into neutral points, but I only have one I want to mention, and it might seem a little silly, but the setup and teardown for this game is a bit of a chore. This has to do with the fact that you first need to figure out what your two modules are, then you pull those out, and then you need to break up all the basic cards, and then break up all the modules and put them into their associated piles, shuffle all those, then build a big tableau of all those cards in front of you, and then you pass out the player boards, and then you need to get the zeros, then you need to bring out all the different types of trains, and blah, 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 blah. There's just a lot of things you need to pull out of this box and set up. It seems like it's nice once people kind of know how to play the game so that you can crowdsource doing that. Doing it all by yourself is a little bit annoying. And the flip side is once you get to the end of the game, everybody understands how the game plays, so they can all break the game down together. But it's still going to take 5 to 10 minutes to probably resort all of these cards and put them back into the box. Now, there is a wonderful insert in the box. I think we'd be in big trouble if that insert wasn't there. This setup and teardown would be even worse, and I'm really glad that insert exists. But all that being said, you're probably looking at an extra 15-ish minutes total, maybe even 20, just to prepare the game to actually play. So it's probably a good thing that it plays so quickly. And now we have my negative points. And once again, I only have one, but it's somewhat significant. I have a problem with the murder module. This game comes with 5 different modules. You get to pick 2 out of the 5. That's wonderful. It gives you all sorts of variety. But the couple games that I played with the secret murderer and all the investigation tokens and all that, it just hasn't really worked the way I wanted it to, which is really unfortunate because to a certain degree, the murder module is a big selling point to this game. You know, having a Euro that has these hidden roles and all this stuff going on, and you might just lose even though you have the most points. Like, thematically, that's exciting, and I was very actively interested. I mean, this is probably the module I was most excited to try, and I was surprised after that first game how I was feeling kind of underwhelmed by it. And then I played a second game with it, and yeah, there's some weird things about it. First of all, some of those investigation tokens have victory points on them, and a couple of them also let you discard other investigation tokens, which makes a really weird thing go on with the that investigation tokens as a currency. Because while you're playing the game, especially if you are the murderer, which I was in one of the games, you are constantly looking out to see how many tokens everybody takes. And the fingerprints on these tokens can be 1, 2, or 3, and that's a reasonable amount of variety and randomness to a certain extent there already. But if you pick up one of those tokens that lets you discard another token at the end of the game, well, that's effectively like picking up -1 token. And that can really swing, and it means that you really don't know how much investigation or how many evidence pieces that each person has, despite the big stacks they have. And then the victory points, I mean, just getting a couple victory points as opposed to getting this evidence, it's just such an odd swing. I feel like if I play this game with people who really want to try it again, I'm going to remove those. And that might be a little weird because in a 4-player game, we got really close to running out of the tokens. And if I remove the victory points and the discard evidence ones, we might actually end up running out, which is not great. But I just think you already have enough variance between the 1 to 3. So you're already looking around trying to figure out about how many fingerprints everybody has, especially as a murderer. I don't like the extra thing where you can actually just benefit by actually taking these tokens. That just seems kind of like the antithesis of what you want going on with these cards, especially considering many of the cards in this set give you a really powerful action, but you're forced to take a piece of evidence yourself. Well, you could do that and then take a discard one, and then that was such a humongous swing of a turn that I just don't like how that actually plays out. So maybe a house rule will make it better because it is a fascinating idea and I want to really enjoy it. But so far, it is definitely the weakest module that I played, and it's likely that I'm going to avoid it in the future. Let's now go into the variability for first class, and I'll keep this brief because I've already pretty much covered this. It's way above average, and it's all to do with those modules. You have 5, you pick 2, that's 10 different combinations. Even if you think one of them is weak, like I do with the murder mystery module, you can remove that and still have a bunch of different ways to play this game. In addition to the fact you can play the same set of modules and maybe do the go heavier with another strategy. Like last time you went big time with the train, this time you go more with the train cars. There's just lots of different ways to play this game, and I think it gives it really good replayability, and I think it's going to see the table a lot more often than your average Euro game. First class plays 2 to 4 players, and I've played all of those player counts and can honestly say that it's great at each of them. If I was forced to pick a favorite, it'd probably be the 3-player because, well, at 4, there can be a little bit of downtime. Even though the game is short overall, as I mentioned before, there can be a little bit of analysis paralysis sometimes, so it can be a little bit of time before it comes back around to you, although the game is still going to be rather short in general. And then on the 2-player side, it still plays great, but having a 3rd player sometimes mixes things up a little bit more, and it means that you're going to clear the rows a little bit less quickly, so it's less likely for a whole bunch of things to get dumped out. Once 2 cards are taken, the other 4 are discarded. That's a rather big swing. But, I'm kind of nitpicking here. 2, 3, and 4 are all really great ways to play the game. In conclusion, I've played First Class 5 times, and after my first play, I really liked the game, and after my second play, I pretty much had fallen in love, and every single subsequent game after this I've played is just making me like this game more and more. The only issue I have with it is that murder mystery module, which has been a bit of a letdown, but the other modules are so interesting, and the way they interact with each other is so cool that I almost don't even care. I mean, the biggest problem with the murder module is that it sounds neat, and it's unfortunate that it's a letdown, but when you get mixes with the passengers and the celebrities, like that's a really interesting combo. You have these switches and mechanics, which you put cards in between your two trains, and it's got conditional stuff going on there. There's so much to think about there. I just love the way this game makes me think. The decisions are interesting. They can sometimes feel really meaty and heavy, which is surprising for such a short game. You only have 18 of these main actions. It really feels like you want to make every single one of them count. You can get these great combos going with the contracts that you're resolving, as well as just dumping your money to get all these free actions to move your train and get a bunch of more free actions. This game just does a really good job of making me feel like I'm doing interesting, fun things, and every time I've finished the game, I've been satisfied with the experience, and at this point, I'm looking forward to playing it a bunch more to explore some of the many module combinations that I haven't even had a chance to do yet. At this point, I'd like to thank everyone who's been supporting this channel through Patreon, including all of these producer-level pledges. If you too would like to directly support everything that I do here, you can do so at patreon.com/JonGetsGames, and I'd really appreciate it. Also, if you'd like to see more in-depth board game reviews like this one, as well as full game playthroughs and vlogs, you can do so by subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.